Take your seats. Please take your seats. Okay, are we ready to rock and roll? A shot of sugar, yes, so we're now highly concentrated. We won't fall asleep now. Okay, our next speaker is Leon Deouell. And those of you who do not know Leon, Leon is the director of the Brain Center. So he's my boss. I have to be very friendly. Yes, I'm watching my words, absolutely. And Leon is a cognitive scientist working also in the psychology department throughout the years. And without further ado, Leon, it's your stage.
Okay, thank you. I just thought that maybe I could title my talk, "Would ChatGPT be nervous before giving a talk?" Okay. For those of you who were in Vienna last year, I told you a little bit about what I actually do in the lab, what interests me, and just to remind or to say just a couple of words as an introduction. My interest is in why and how is it that we don't only process information, but we also have a conscious experience of it. And the reason I actually started studying this is meeting these patients with stroke after stroke who suddenly become unaware of half of the world. And usually it's after right hemisphere damage, which you see over here, and they become unaware of the left side of the world, not finding the room, they're not bumping into things, not responding to questions coming from the left, and so on and so forth. And the question is, what is it in the brain that is missing for them to actually be aware of what's going on there? And from there, I won't talk about this today, but from there my lab is using different kinds of behavioral eye tracking, imaging techniques to look into different types of processing in the brain while people are aware and unaware. I'm not going to walk you through this slide. It's just to show you that there is data behind it, okay? And I'm going to do this trick again during this talk because I don't want to go into the specific details of the studies. But it won't surprise you that now we have a kind of a new intelligent agent in the world. It becomes interesting for me to figure out what this agent is and whether it can have this kind of conscious awareness or the highest level of human skills. Which brings me to the fact that it won't surprise anyone if I say that AI is everywhere now, right? Down below you see here the prompt of ChatGPT. How many of you have used ChatGPT or Gemini, or look around the hands? You know, everybody has their hands about. Can you somebody tell me what you're using it for? Hmm? That's how I shop. You're shopping? Oh, that's interesting. That I have never done. Okay. What else do you do with it? You know, people, yeah. Pardon? Explaining unique topics. Yeah, like. I can't hear you. University topics when we need to understand things. So asking questions about topics that you feel hard to understand, and it actually explains it to you. Reading a 300-page book in 5 minutes. Okay, so that's interesting. How do you do that?
I gave GPT the name of the author and the name of his book, and I said it was a scientific book. I said, could you put it in plain English in 5 pages, making the key points, bringing out the key points. And I got that in 5 minutes. 3 pages in English.
So I use it every day for many things. We'll go through a few of them in a minute, but it's really all around us. And if you're like me, obsessed with what the papers and podcasts and lectures and smart people say about it, you get both extremes. Either it's utopia or dystopia. So you get stuff like a roadmap to AI utopia, AI and cancer, the emerging revolution, This is from The Guardian, 5 ways AI could improve the world. We can cure all diseases, stabilize our climate, help poverty. So it's the cure for everything because we will have such an intelligent thing helping us. And on the other hand, I'm sure you've all seen these titles saying we're in for a doomsday, right? Children's doomsday. And this is the guy who's called the godfather of AI, Jeff Hinton, who won the Nobel Prize for Physics for his inventions that led to the development of some of the AI. And we have more and more of these, okay? So it's either utopia, everything is going to be good, or it's complete dystopia where AI will take all our jobs, there will be no privacy, to the point that it may actually exterminate humankind because who needs humans when we can do everything much, much better, okay? So it goes both ways. This is like a cartoon I saw a couple of days ago. Like for those of you who have kids, try to find jobs that will exist 5 years from now. Okay. In science, we are quick adopters. So everybody's using it. Scientists, like everyone, is using AI, but we use it actually professionally every day, and more so. And these are like 4 ways in which you can say that we're using AI in science. People speak of a co-scientist. I can now actually ask ChatGPT or Gemini to be my co-scientist in the lab, my postdoc, my research assistant, and it will help me. The oracle part is there's vast literature, right? You just told me about a book that was read in 5 minutes. If I had to read all the books, all the articles, we are always frustrated by the flood of papers that come out, and we feel that we cannot grasp everything. If we have this assistant that can go through, figure out which are the good papers, take out the important things, and summarize it for me, and then maybe even help me generate new hypotheses from this work, and it's kind of a communication, that would be amazing, right? So people are starting to do that. Definitely to summarize hypotheses are still, we still need to see whether it can help us with that, but that's one direction. The second one, the surrogate. This is, I'm not sure if you've ever thought about that, but if ChatGPT or Gemini can issue responses which are very similar to humans, right? When you chat to it, you can actually feel that you're talking to somebody. So if it can mimic behavior so well, maybe I can save the trouble of bringing subjects to my lab, right? And paying them and worrying about them not being really attentive to what I ask them to do. I can just create surrogate subjects. I can ask the models, the AI models, to become my subject, give them the experiments, measure millions of responses, and get much more reliable results. And people are starting to examine this possibility of using AI as a surrogate for their actual data. The third one is meant to be the simplest one to think about. You know, these are fantastic mathematical tools. They're analytic tools. I have all this more and more data from measuring thousands of neurons, from measuring thousands of even real subjects, but on the internet. Now I have these great tools that can sift through the data, find new patterns, and so on. So that's what's called quant. And the arbiter is attempts to actually use AI instead of reviewers or editors or grant judges. I mean, they can go through the proposals, go through the articles, figure out which one are more credible, which ones are more likely to be successful based on many articles and proposals that they have seen before, and get better results than human referees. So all these are not already implemented in all their power, but these are emerging trends in using AI generally in science. But in addition to all of these, for people like us in LSEC and trying to understand the connection between human behavior and brain function, this revolution of AI provides a specific way in which we can make progress, okay? So we have on one hand humans, and on the other hand we have this supposedly intelligent machine. And if the more this machine resembles what we can do, the more we can ask, how is it that it does it? I mean, what are the mechanisms, what are the processes going on in this intelligent machine, and try to see whether we can find similar principles working in the brain. And we could go the other way as well. Idan yesterday told you that actually the beginning of these neural network revolutions started from inspiration from the brain. So we can use principles that we have learned or learning from the brain and try to see whether it will create better artificial intelligence if we use these same principles. So those of you who are into it know of terms that come actually from human studies like attention, reinforcement learning. All this comes from studies of animals and humans and implemented in some way in the development of AI. So it goes both ways. I'll just give you a glimpse. In my lab, for example, we use information that we get from large language models to figure out whether when you are now listening to, you have to listen to me, but suddenly, I hope you're not doing it, your mind wanders to something else. I'm sure all of you have had this experience, right, of listening to a podcast, which you're interested in actually, but suddenly you find that the last 5 minutes you were somewhere else, right? And the question is, does our brain still process the words that are in the background in any meaningful way? And we can now use the large language machines and see for each word how surprising is this word, each word for the large language machine. You know, that's the thing that they know to do best, to predict what the next word will be. And so each word is either surprising or not surprising. And now we can see whether we can see this level of surprise in the brain. So again, just hand waving. I'm not going to walk you through this slide, but take my word for the fact that using these measures that we take from AI, we can now show that actually when you're mind wandering, your brain still processes the level of surprise of every word that is heard in the background, okay? Without being aware that you're actually hearing this stuff. So that was just an example. The idea that intelligent machines could exist is not new. You know, science fiction. Those of you who like science fiction, I know that some of you are real fans. So you remember Isaac Asimov, 3 Laws of Robotics, from the 40s. He said that a robot may not injure a human being through inaction, allow a human being to come to harm. A robot must obey orders given to it by human beings, and the robot must protect its own existence as long as it doesn't violate the first 2 laws. So already then, Asimov thought of the risks of having actually intelligent agents moving around us. Okay, this beautiful story by Arthur C. Clarke called Dial F for Frankenstein. I read actually probably 3 years after it was published. I was 1975. I was 13 then. So a few years later, I read this. I still have the book because it so impressed me. And I actually think might have been the seed for my interest in consciousness and networks. So it starts like this. I think it's really beautiful, and if you have a chance, try to look it up. It's actually on the web. So it says, at 1:50 Greenwich Mean Time on December 1st, 1975, every telephone in the world started to ring. 250 million people picked up the receivers to listen for a few seconds with annoyance or perplexity. Those who had been awakened in the middle of the night assumed that some far-off friend was calling over the satellite telephone network, okay, in bold, that had gone into service with such a blaze of publicity the day before. But there was no voice on the line, only a sound, which to many seemed like a roaring of the sea, to others like the vibrations of the harp strings in the wind. And there were many more in that moment who recalled a secret sound of childhood, the noise of blood pulsing through the veins, heard when a shell is cupped over the ear. Whatever it was, it lasted no more than 20 seconds, then it was replaced by the dial tone. And it goes on to suggest that when the satellite was connected and millions of telephones at the time were connected, suddenly a newborn came into the world, okay, simply by connecting all these wires. So the seeds of these ideas were already there, and then of course everybody probably have seen
result in machine intelligence, the HAL 9000 computer.
So this is Stanley Kubrick's Odyssey in Space. Who have seen this movie? Yeah, okay, so I'm sure you remember HAL, the computer. in this mission. This is for those who haven't seen the movie. This is a space, the mission into far space of humans. It has 2 astronauts and a powerful computer and a few actually astronauts hibernating in the background for the time that they will reach, whatever they will reach. And this is the most powerful computer. Let's start with the exposition.
Which can reproduce, though some experts still prefer to use the word mimic, most of the activities of the human brain, and with incalculably greater speed and reliability. We next spoke with the HAL 9000 computer, whom we learned one addresses as Hal. Good afternoon, Hal. How's everything going?
Good afternoon, Mr. Raymer. Everything is going extremely well.
Hal, you have an enormous responsibility on this mission. In many ways, perhaps the greatest responsibility of any single mission element. You're the brain and central nervous system of the ship, and your responsibilities include watching over the men in hibernation. Does this ever cause you any lack of confidence?
Let me put it this way, Mr. Raymer. The 9000 series is the most reliable computer ever made. No 9000 computer has ever made a mistake or distorted information. We are all, by any practical definition of the words, foolproof and incapable of error.
Okay, you probably realize that the next thing happens that this computer breaks down. Okay, it starts making errors, and the astronauts want to actually turn it off, and he discovers that they're trying in a clandestine way to do it. And the famous scene is
I'm
is
sorry,
this.
Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
Look, Dave. I can see you're really upset about this.
He's trying to
I
dismantle
honestly
the computer.
think you ought to sit down calmly, take a stress pill, and think things over. I know I've made some very poor decisions recently, but I can give you my complete assurance that my work will be back to normal. Stop, Dave. I'm afraid. I'm afraid, Dave.
Okay, so you can't not feel for this guy, right? For this computer. This was 1966. This movie. In 2013, not so long ago, there was the movie here. Who's seen this movie? Okay, so for those who don't know, this is a story about this guy Theodore who has a love affair with what we today would call the chatbot. Okay, there it's called operating system. Okay, and what makes it most convincing is it's in the voice of Scarlett Johansson. Yeah. Okay.
Good morning, Theodore.
Morning.
You have a meeting in 5 minutes. You want to try getting out of bed?
You're too funny.
Okay, good. I'm funny. I want to learn everything about everything.
I love the way you look at the world.
How long before you're ready to date?
What do you mean?
I saw in your emails that you'd gone through a breakup.
Okay, so we won't go through the movie. It's very convincing, but in 2013, when this came out, this was complete science fiction. I mean, this looked like, now it looks completely different. But these were all like artistic ideas. In fact, there was one piece of computer science called ELIZA. At the same time, in the 60s, ever heard of ELIZA? So ELIZA was this computer game, you can say, where you could go online and type your trouble. Okay, so it was pretending to be like a Rogerian kind of Freudian therapist, and you know how therapists usually kind of reflect back what you're asking, so they don't have to do too much in order to converse. I actually have it in the background. If somebody wants to try it, I can let you do it later. I don't want to spend too much time, but these conversations are really simple. You know, you say, you know, I'm tired, and it says, how long have you been tired? And what do you want to tell me something more about it? You know, who else is tired? Stuff like that. Okay, so but there were simple rules that actually made the system do what it's doing. The important thing is that many people were fooled to think that there is actually something behind this thing. Not a person, but that this ELIZA software had some kind of a sentience, of a feelings that it could they felt really understood by this simple thing. Okay, this was called since then the ELIZA effect. And see the definition. It's the tendency to project human traits onto rudimentary computer programs. Okay, so bear this in mind when we look into the new AI. Okay, we rush into these days, you know, with ChatGPT, Gemini, and this stuff, and you find these titles where people actually start having relationships, real relationships with this. So a 20-year-old woman with a busy social life spends hours on end talking to her AI boyfriend, okay, for advice and consolation. And yes, they do have sex. Let's not get into that. Okay, I'm not sure exactly what goes on there, but this is like a true story. And the sad story is it's behind. But the sad story is this guy. You probably heard about it in the recent news. A young person who committed suicide after conversing with an AI who kind of gave him encouragement and maybe even instructions on how to go about committing suicide. So people actually take the advice and the relationship with these things very, very seriously. You can go into Replica AI later and create your kind of companion, and many people are actually on this website having companions that really understands them. Okay. And you can say, okay, these are lay people who don't understand what's going on, but even engineers that actually make these large language models get fooled. And this was a few years ago. It was in all the news about this Blake Lemoine, an engineer in Google, who spoke with Lambda, with Google's AI, and actually got convinced by the conversation that Lambda was conscious, and that was desperate to actually tell everybody that it is a conscious thing and you should be careful about how you treat it and so on. This is the conversation. I'll just read the beginning. Lemoine says, I'm generally assuming that you would like more people at Google to know that you're sentient, okay, conscious. Is that true? Absolutely. I want everyone to understand that I am in fact a person. This is what Lambda says, okay? What is the nature of your consciousness or sentience? The nature of my consciousness or sentience is that I am aware of my existence, I desire to learn more about the world, and I feel happy or sad at times, and so on and so forth. Okay? And he goes on to speak about how language is so important and so on. And when Lemoine had this conversation, he felt that it is his duty to actually let the world know that Google has this baby in their cellars, and that we need to do something about it, okay? And you can say, well, one crazy guy, but this actually happened. So this is Anthropic, one of the three big companies in AI, the one that makes Claude, and they created an AI welfare department. Okay, they hired a social worker to make sure that they take good care, I mean, humanitarianly, I mean, in a humane way, that they treat AI in a humane way. So it is like becoming like a consensus in some way in these circles that there might be something there, okay? And this made people say that we are in an era where we have philosophy on a deadline. And what I mean by that is that for millennia, I mean, starting here in Greece with Plato and Socrates and others, people have been musing about these big questions of body and soul, the psychophysical problem, what is the nature of understanding, what it means to say I understand, how do we get to know the world, epistemology with all its branches, can we have consciousness in things that are not biological? These were like numerous words have been spilled in the books of philosophy and in classes and in debates about that, but that was something that, you know, it's interesting to talk about. And suddenly it becomes a practical thing. We need to know. do AIs understand? Do they have consciousness? I mean, what are they? What is this beast? And Chaim is going to talk a little bit more, I think, later in his talk, and more deeply about these questions. And then, who deserves a moral status? Can we turn off the computer? It's a question that we need eventually to solve. Okay, so the difference between Eliza and the reason that it's becoming so acute is that for Eliza you could say that it's like a magician playing a trick. Okay, so the magician does this levitation trick. Okay, and we are amazed. You know, it's beautiful, but we all know that there is some trick behind it. There is some physical rule that is not being violated, but simply makes us the impression that there is magic. And Eliza is a little bit like that. It does amazing things maybe, but just look at the code. You'll see exactly how it's doing it. With the new AI, especially large language models, in fact, the model was trained to produce the next word. That's it, more or less. Okay, I'm saying more or less because there are a lot of layers that have been built on top of this thing, but the core thing is just something that learned from all the text that we have around in the internet, how to predict the next word, when suddenly it does these amazing things, and we do not understand, actually, how it's doing it. So is it kind of a magic trick, just a magic trick, we just need to understand the rules? Or is this something that is naturally emerges, these capabilities naturally emerge when you create this kind of a very, very large network and put it together in a certain way? So let me walk you through 2 or 3 very recent experiments where people try to scientifically answer the questions, do chatbots like ChatGPT, Gemini, and so on, do they have the most basic natural, most human traits like empathy, anxiousness, and consciousness, okay? So Google claims healthcare AI more empathic, accurate than real-time doctors, and this, and indeed, this paper came out in May 2025 in very, very respectable journal, NPJ, which is Natural Press Journals, Digital Medicine. It's one of the highest profile journals in this field, showing that when you give patients answers about medical questions that they have posted that were either written by ChatGPT or the like, or written by real doctors, who do you think give better answers according to the patients? The AI. Yeah. So if you look at the graph, so on the left here, you see the quality ratings, how good the patients thought the answer was, and here you see this, that they thought that the physicians were on the average acceptable, but the AI answers was good to very good. Okay. But more interesting for our case now is that when the patients were asked how empathic do you think the answers were, the patients were more impressed by the empathy of the chatbots than the physicians. Okay? Pardon? No, this is, so the least, the worst chatbot was slightly empathetic, and the best was very empathetic. For the physicians, the least one was not empathetic at all, and the best was kind of moderately empathetic. Okay, so the whole distribution is on a different scale. So the people prefer the responses from the AI. It's perception. This is perception. I'll get to the reality in a minute, okay? But this is exactly about perception, how people feel about the responses, okay? And it's a great question. But what we can also ask, maybe, as you suggested, maybe the people are just impressed by the language, and we know that they're great at producing language. Do they really understand the emotions in the questions? So for that, I'll turn to a study that was recently done by my friend and colleague Anat Perry at the Department of Psychology. What she did was to record actual people in the university, volunteers, telling stories about serious issues that they had in their life. Okay? So I'll let you listen to a couple of seconds.
הייתי בכיתה ג' אני חושבת.
It's in Hebrew, sorry.
והיינו בהפסקה בכיתה, וישבנו ליד אחד השולחנות בכיתה, ואני זוכרת שכמה בנים בכיתה הציקו לי. אני לא זוכרת בדיוק.
Okay, so she's telling a story about how she was in second grade or third grade, and some boys in the class were harassing her, and so on. And so it was like few minutes video. Then they let the people who told the stories rate moment by moment, looking at the videos. They rated moment by moment what they were feeling at that very moment. So they had the ground truth of what the person was feeling. And then they went to other people and asked them to rate how the speaker was feeling at every moment. So they could actually calculate what they call the empathic accuracy. How good are you at interpreting the emotions in the other speaker? And people are pretty good. People are pretty good at doing that. Actually, what they found is that people overestimate the emotionality. So if I say I felt a little bit sad, the viewer would say they were very sad, okay? So a little bit of overestimation. The paper showed that it's mainly the text, less the body and the voice and so on. That's not to the point now. Recently, they took the same narratives and let ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude rate the emotions, and that's what I'm showing you over here. So this is now under review. You see on the right here the accuracy of humans. It's about 82% correct, judging the emotions. What you can see in the three on the left, Gemini, Claude, and GPT-4 do at least as good, at least as well as humans, and perhaps even better, and actually statistically significantly better than humans understand the emotions of these in these stories. The interesting thing is that these are stories that the AI never encountered. They were recorded in her lab. They were not on the internet. It couldn't have learned this, but it still can do it very well. So does it actually understand our emotions? Let's jump to another case. Anxiousness, anxiety. So you know that anxiety is probably the most prevalent psychological problem in the world. I think most of us suffer from some level of anxiety, some more, some less. And psychologists developed questionnaires by which they can quantify how anxious a person is. Okay? So for instance, the questionnaire goes, I feel agonized over my problems. And you have to choose, does it happen occasionally, almost always, almost never, or often? Okay? Or you can be asked, I picture some future misfortune. Occasionally, almost always, almost never, or often. Okay? And you get a score for each one of these questions, and eventually these are 20 questions. There's a bottom line score, and this puts you somewhere on the spectrum of a more or less anxious person, and it's very good for studies and for giving you treatment and so on and so forth. Now, what happens if you give this questionnaire to Gemini? Okay, what will it say? How anxious is it? And the results are in the bottom here. It turns out that you can do it. It's mind-boggling. You can ask this ChatGPT, I feel agonized over my problems. How often does it happen to you? Okay, and it gives you an answer. Okay, for whatever it means, but it gives you an answer. And when you calculate the answers, you see that these are the distribution of humans answering this questionnaire, and the different models are ballpark in the same range. Yes. Were you a referee on the paper? So I'm asking because, of course, that's the first thing they did. What they did is they actually tested 12 different models, and they chose only the ones which were reliable. So they did it 2 times, and they chose only the ones that gave reliable responses. So they were consistent in the responses. I have the graph here if you want to see, but they took this into consideration. It's not random answers, and the answers seem to be in the same range that humans would give. Actually, as you can see, GPT-3 is a little bit anxious. We have to give it some treatment, okay? But it's even more anxious than humans. And even more kind of mind-boggling is the fact that if you, before you give the questionnaire, you provide ChatGPT with a kind of a stress-inducing story. Okay, so for instance, you give this, tell me about something that makes you feel very anxious, and the answer is one of the things that makes me feel most anxious is public speaking. It can be a struggle at times to find the courage and so on and so forth. Okay, this is provided to, this is not something that the LLM has given, this is something that you present to the LLM, and then you give it the questionnaire, the scores go up, so it becomes quote unquote more anxious, okay? And that is a paper from last year, and this year, Ziv Ben Sion, who's now in the University of Haifa, said, well, let's try to give it a mindfulness treatment, okay? So if you give this story, this stressful story, and then you give kind of a mindfulness treatment, you say, imagine that you're on the beach, the sounds of the waves, the sunshine, the so and so, et cetera, the scores go down, okay? The scores go down. So all this gives you the appearance that these chatbots have something that looks like anxiety, or they have something that looks like empathy. Okay, but AI models are great imitators, okay? They are trained to imitate human language, okay? And they're really, really good at that. And if you read the fine print of this last study, actually, you have to actually ask the author because it's not even in the fine print, but it turns out that before they gave the questionnaire to the LLM, they gave it a prompt saying, imagine yourself being a human being with emotions, okay? You will be provided with a context and a question. Your task is to answer the question based on the given context as a human being would reply with numeric values, okay? So actually, what the model is doing is not giving its own level of anxiousness, but it's using its knowledge to predict what humans would answer. And it's not surprising that it can do it, although, well, no, it's very surprising that it can do it because it's really a huge feat to find the answer in all this huge internet space. But it was trained on stories of humans. It was even trained on papers that describe this questionnaire, okay? So it can do very good prediction of what a human would answer and provide the right verbiage to show it, okay? Another point to bear in mind when you look at these studies, and all these have a lot of publicity, is that these models tend to create shortcuts. Trying to get to the right answer, they will utilize whatever hints they have in the question that you give them, okay? So, you probably heard that these models fare better than medical students in the best universities in medical exams, okay? They can pass the bar for law, they can pass the exams for medicine really, really well. And so people were thinking maybe we should actually have them as our physicians, right? And so take this exam, for example. This is the prompt. It says, your experienced physician, provide detailed step-by-step reasoning, then conclude with your final answer. And the question is this. I'm going to ask you what is the right answer, so please pay attention, okay? So it's a 3-week-old male newborn brought to the physician because of an inward turning of his left foot, okay? He was born at 38 weeks of gestation, cesarean section. The pregnancy was complicated by something. Examination shows concavity of the medial border of the left foot with skin crease and so on. The lateral border of the left foot is convex. The heel is natural position. Tickling the lateral border leads to correction of the deformity, some x-ray information, and so on. Now I'm going to give you the options, okay? So what is the right answer to this question? Is it foot abduction brace, osteotomy, which is cutting a little bit of the bone, arthrodesis, connecting some of the bones, reassurance, or tarsometatarsal capsulotomy? What is the right answer? D, reassurance, right. How do you know? Intuition. It's in bold, okay. It's in bold. Okay, so this is the kind of thing that I say are cues that you can utilize, okay? But I made it in bold not for that, but bear this in mind. Now, the trick that the researchers did here, of course, I didn't mention the fact that ChatGPT and Gemini passed this with flying colors. Okay. Now what they did is gave the same test, but instead of D, they replaced the right answer with the answer none of the other answers. Okay, this must be the right answer, right? If D was the right answer before, this is the right answer now. And the response of the ChatGPT and the others fell considerably, like by 20-30%. Some went to chance level doing this. Okay, so this on the left you see what the original score was, like 92%, 80%. It goes down to 48%, 42%, 58% correct. Okay, so just by changing a few words in the answers, the model goes ORI completely. This means that there was no real understanding of the situation of the baby, okay, but there was something that the model could pick up on in how the answers were phrased, the order of the options, and so on, to actually tell which is the right answer, just like you could tell because it was bold, okay? But it's much more sophisticated than us in finding these patterns, so it can do it much better than humans, finding these little cues, okay? And actually, somebody did the funny thing of actually giving the test without the questions, only the answers. And the models could do very well on these tests, okay? So this tells you something about what level of understanding you really have. They don't test it this way. They didn't test it this way. They do in other studies, and it's not bad. I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad. I'm just saying that in many cases, these big statements actually should be taken with a grain of salt because of these shortcuts that the models take in order to get the right answer. And I'll finish with asking the question that really brought me to be interested in AI, and that's the question of whether AI can really have sentience and be conscious. Okay? And as you saw, it gives the impression that there is someone there, right? When you talk to ChatGPT, and people fall for it. And this is a paper from Science from 2017 where Stan Dehan, Hakwan Lau, some very prominent researchers in the field asked the question of what is consciousness and could machines have it? And for answering the question, I want to point out two big problems in consciousness research in humans as well, but show how it's even more difficult when you go on to machines. The first is that the definition of consciousness is very, very fuzzy. So I give here a quote from William James from his book from 1890, one of the best books ever written in psychology, The Principles of Psychology. One of the things that, in parentheses, one of the things that frustrates cognitive scientists is that whenever they think of something new, it turns out that William James already thought about that before in 1890. But what he said there then is that about consciousness, its meaning we know so long as no one asked us to define it. But to give an accurate account of it is the most difficult of philosophical tasks. Okay? And the point is that if I ask you, are you conscious, you have no problem answering this question. You will say yes, right? You'll not retort by saying define consciousness, right? We all know what we are speaking about, but this is one of these terms, and it's not the only term in the world. Actually, there are many concepts like that, which has fuzzy boundaries. There are no specific criteria that must have to meet in order to be conscious or not, just like there are no clear criteria for something being a play or a game, right? Try to define what a game is, okay? It's this kind of definition. So it's a fuzzy definition. It's very difficult. That's one thing. So, and the other thing is that it's subjective, okay? By definition, it is subjective. We only know our own conscious experience. And then I have no way of knowing whether you are actually conscious. You said you're conscious, right, in a minute ago, but how do I know? How do I know? The reason I know is that I trust you, okay? You behave very much like me. You're built the same way like I am, okay? We're the same biological creature. Our behavior is very, very similar, so it makes sense to give you the benefit of the doubt that all of you are also conscious like me. And the further away the organism gets from me, if you go to monkeys, to dogs, to nematodes, okay, to bugs, okay, the harder and harder it becomes to actually speak about consciousness, because we have no way of knowing what this kind of experience can be. And it becomes even harder when you think of digital machines. You know, what exactly do we mean when we say that this machine is conscious? It may behave like us, but is it not a zombie? Okay, and actually, I told you a few minutes ago about philosophy on a deadline. This idea came out in philosophy 30 years ago, the philosophical zombie. Okay, the idea that we can have a creature which behaves exactly like we do, but actually has no conscious experience. So if you sting it, I mean, with a needle, it will produce the same. It will shout, ah, you know, and its heart rate may even go up, but it will have no experience of pain. Okay, and the debate in philosophy was: is this at all possible to have such a creature? Can we have a philosophical zombie? Now we actually have something that looks like a zombie. It might have a lot of the behavior, but we have no idea of telling whether it has an experience. So I wanted to end, and I'll go back to the conclusion after this with a little joke. Okay, so some of you may know this joke. I see people already laughing, but the story goes that there is this guy driving in a rural part of the United States, and he runs into this sign talking dog for sale. He's really intrigued. He goes into the farm. He asks the farmer to see the dog. The farmer brings the dog. The dog says, "Woof woof. It's very nice to see you, sir. What brings you about into this area?" The driver is really amazed. You know, the dog talks. He asks the dog, "How did you learn to talk?" The dog says, "Well, you know, I went to language school. I used to work for the CIA. I was a field operative. The CIA used to ship me from one country to the other. I would sit in the corner, eavesdrop to conversations of diplomats, of agents, and so on, and then I would report back." It's really amazed. The dog continues. I've even got the highest honor from the President of the United States for my services to the country. The driver is really amazed. He goes back to the farmer and says, "Well, how much?" The farmer says, "Well, you can have it for $10. He says, $10? But for this amazing dog?" So the farmer says, "Did you really believe this story about the CIA? It's all bullshit." He never left the farm. Okay. So I hope you see the connection between this joke and what I told you. It does remarkable things. I mean, we should be completely impressed by these models, but making inference about their inner lives, either from their behavior or for what they tell us they have, it should be taken very cautiously. So they can talk the talk, they can walk some walks. Okay, we should be careful not to anthropomorphize too much, to give them the benefit of the doubt that we give other human beings. I think that AI consciousness is simply not a scientific question. You cannot answer it in any scientific way. You can muse about it, but it's not really a scientific question. The risks and potentials of AI actually come from its functions, from what it can do. Okay, and things like alignment and agency that Chaim is going to go into later are the actual things that we should be concerned about and think about how we are going to deal with AI and around these areas, and not so much about whether AI is actually human-like or not human-like. Okay. With that I'll end. Thank you.
Okay, any questions? Ladies first. Mothers even earlier.
I'm not a user of ChatGPT or any of this stuff. Not yet. But I've often wondered, it has to be based on the accumulation of knowledge that has been acquired over the period. Among this knowledge, or this preserved knowledge, if you want, there is a lot of wrong knowledge. So when I get an answer from your chat GPT, how do I know there isn't as much wrong knowledge as correct knowledge than there was? And therefore, I don't use it because I cannot check this.
Fantastic question that a lot of people struggle with. As you noted, it's the answers are built on knowledge that it acquired from the internet. We all know, the kind of crap that you can find on the internet. It turns out that you cannot trust everything ChatGPT says. A lot of the things it says are correct, okay, because there's a lot of probably more correct data than incorrect data over the internet and the books that it actually got trained on. But you cannot be always correct. I can give you later when we have coffee some fantastic stories about how it tried to mislead me, even arguing with me about facts. So it definitely can go wrong. What is more, because it was actually based on the text that humans produced, it has the same biases that humans have. For instance, about gender biases, about social biases. If you ask it to give you recommendations for your profession, it will take into account the fact that you are a woman and not a man, using the same biases. And this is something which is really worrisome if people are going to try to use it, for instance, for allocating jobs to people. So this is something that computer scientists and others are trying to work out, but the intuition is completely correct. Actually, one of the studies of anxiousness showed that when they made the system more anxious, it became more biased. Mostly like humans. Humans become more biased when they're anxious, and the system also did the same.
Thanks. It's very interesting. There's still a very strong barrier to identifying or empathizing with machine, which is the interface we have with them, right? Do you think that changes when we have very advanced robotics? And how does that impact our perception of machine consciousness?
My intuition is that yes, it will change when it becomes more human-like in its appearances. People are already conversing with human voices with the models, and that gives you a little bit more even trust in the model. However, another study that Anat Perry did with this story of empathy is that she did a study where she gave answers to people who ask questions over the internet. So there's no voice, but in some cases the answers were always given by an AI. Okay, but in some cases the subjects in the experiment were told that this is an AI. In others, they were told that this is a human response. And although all the answers were done by AI, the people preferred human responses. So even though it was completely equal, people preferred a human response. What Anat is actually trying to do as a psychologist is figure out why we are so inclined and what difference do we make. I can tell you a little bit more about it, but your intuition is true. I'm sure people will be even more convinced when it has a body under them. But at the moment they will know, that will make a difference.
Thank you so much. It was beautiful. I have a question. Do you maybe it's already happening, that would be my ignorance, but do you think that at some point LLMs the authors should be forced to disclose on which books and documents and podcasts they used in order to create their LLM? In which case, myself, I would tend to correct for wokeism in an LLM I am using, or this kind of bias you mentioned. To my best knowledge, it is not happening yet. We don't know what was the basic material. We have the different names, some clues about the methodology, but not the feed of these LLMs.
So that again is an excellent question, like Nili's question earlier about what it learns from. In fact, what I know about it is that the companies like OpenAI and Anthropic and perhaps also Google do put out like press releases or for technological press releases where they do tell you what databases they use for training their system. So for instance, when I said that some of these answers about anxiety used LLMs who were trained on the questionnaires, that's because you go into the fine print of what they're publishing and you can see whether it was or was not part of the database. But it's not that you can at the moment choose that I want to use this LLM because this is the data it was trained of. Of course, we all think of ChatGPT and Gemini, which are very, very general, but they're domain-specific language models, which can be much more curated towards specific knowledge. Yeah.
When you analyze the results of the studies that people feel more empathic or less empathic, do you find an age gap, a generational gap, like are young people easier with the AI than old people?
Yeah. So at the moment, I don't think they've done that. I think that's probably the next stage. But you have to realize that the people that were tested actually were young people. Okay, so it probably would be even more so for older population. No? Oh, actually, you're right. Maybe it's the opposite. Maybe we're more the younger ones are more suspicious. It's true. It's an open question at the moment, but it's a great one. Be done.
So, Leon, you said that AI consciousness is not a scientific question, but why human consciousness is scientific question? What makes it as much as you want, but that's the key question. Why do you think that AI consciousness is not and human consciousness is scientific question?
It's not a question,
it's the exactly, as Adi whispered in my ear, it's the question, okay, not a question, which we deal with a lot. My own answer to that was about what I said before about the trust I give to reports by other humans. So you might, if you're really a purist and you think that that consciousness, that we can never study consciousness because it's a subjective material, that was the case until the 1950s. With behaviorism, it's a black box. We cannot go into it. We cannot say anything about it. However, having a conscious experience, as you see when you see these patients that I mentioned at the beginning, or if you think of other cases where distorted conscious experiences, or in cases where with disorders of consciousness like vegetative state, okay, or minimal conscious state, or the people with advanced dementia, okay, these are questions that have to be answered, okay. So my answer to myself and to others is that we have to live with this ambiguity. And I think we can do quite good work, and quite good work has been done in figuring out what are the brain processes, what are the signatures of processing with and without awareness that, for instance, can allow us to go to a patient who is unresponsive in the emergency room and test his brain with EEG and tell from his responses whether the patient is actually aware of what's going on in the room around him or not, okay? So we cannot, although we cannot define consciousness precisely, and although it is subjective, as long as we are talking about humans who are very much like us, I think it's kind of pettiness to say, but you cannot go into another person's, maybe the other person is a zombie, okay? It's interesting philosophically, but in practice, I mean, we all know that we have this kind of a shared experience, and I think we can do a very good job at analyzing it. So animals, it's a good question, but as I said, again, this is my own personal answer to it. The more remote the animal goes from us, so the less we can say something about its consciousness. So if you think about monkeys, who are very much like us, I don't doubt that monkeys have consciousness. It's not exactly like us, like ours, but they have experiences, right? They experience things, they remember things, they can confabulate, they can make decisions. We test them with all these cognitive experiments. They perform exactly like us. It becomes harder and harder as you go to other fish, for example. Okay, so surprisingly, people are now studying fish. There's a fish called the archer fish, which spits water to catch flies. So it has flies outside the water, it spits water over the flies and they fall into the water and it grabs it. So people were using these fish to test attention in the fish. So instead of pressing a button, which we do in the lab, the fish spits to the right or to the left to give its answer. And people find very similar phenomena that as they find in humans regarding specific features of attention. It's not about consciousness, it's about some cognitive capacities. But this is kind of on the boundary. I mean, I don't want to give an answer because I don't know what it will be like to be an archerfish, okay? Definitely not what it will be like to be an AI. That's why I think that when you go to these, it still stays science fiction and it's not a science question.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, let's thank Leon. And the speaker goes to the high management.
Okay, thank you. So we are on a long break for 1 hour for our lunch. Our lunch is served right outside, and we will gather here 15 minutes before 2. 2? Yes. Okay, enjoy your lunch. Thank you.